Thousands of campervan owners use this parking trick every week. Some wake up to a $450 fine. Others wake up to a tow truck. And a few, the ones nobody talks about, wake up to find out their insurance is void. What I'm about to show you is the single most overlooked factor in the entire campervan buying process. Not the chassis, not the solar setup, not the gray water tank. Parking. Specifically, overnight parking. The legal, financial, and insurance reality that dealers never bring up, influencers never cover, and buyers only discover after the paperwork is signed. If you're researching a campervan right now, or you've already bought one and you're planning your first real trip, this video could save you thousands, or it could completely change which van you buy. Either way, you need to know this before you go anywhere. The story first. Let me tell you how this usually goes. A couple, retired, mid-60s, spends 8 months researching. They watch 200 videos, they visit 3 dealers, they spend close to 6 figures on a Winnebago Boldt on a Mercedes Sprinter chassis. Beautiful van, fully loaded. They plan a 6-month coastal route, Pacific Coast Highway up through Oregon and Washington, then across to the Northeast. First night out, they find a quiet residential street in a small California beach town. No signs, nobody around. They park, cook dinner, sleep. At 5:47 a.m., there's a knock on the door, a citation. Municipal ordinance prohibiting vehicle habitation on public streets. The officer is polite, explains it's a standard enforcement sweep, happens every weekend. They move on. A month later, outside Seattle, same scenario, different city, a bigger fine this time. By month 3, they've accumulated over $1,000 in citations. They've been asked to move on by law enforcement 4 times, and they've started to wonder whether the trip they planned for 10 years is actually possible in the van they chose. Here's the thing. None of that is the van's fault. None of it is the dealer's fault, technically, but nobody told them, and that information was available. They just didn't know to look for it. That's the problem this video solves. Because here's what most buyers don't realize, and this is the part that changes your entire purchase decision. This isn't a camping problem, it's a vehicle selection problem, and it starts at the dealership months before you ever park anywhere. The legal reality simplified. Let's talk about what's actually happening legally, and I'm going to make this as clear as possible because this is where most explanations lose people. 3 types of restrictions. You need to understand all 3 before you buy. The first is habitation bans. These exist in over 80 U.S. cities, including Los Angeles, Seattle, Denver, and Chicago. The key word is inhabiting. The law doesn't say your van can't park on the street. It says nobody can live in a vehicle on a public street. That's a completely different legal standard. Your van can be perfectly legally parked, and you can still be cited, because the violation is what you're doing inside it, not where it's sitting. Los Angeles enforces this aggressively, so does Seattle, so does San Francisco. These are the cities most associated with the van life aesthetic. They're also the cities with the most active enforcement. The irony is brutal, and most buyers never connect those 2 facts. The second restriction is height and size. A Mercedes Sprinter high roof is nearly 10 feet tall. The Airstream Interstate 24 and the Winnebago Boldt aren't far behind. Many residential overnight parking zones in American cities and virtually all European city center car parks post clearances well below that. You cannot make these vehicles smaller after you buy them. If your travel plans include urban corridors, and for most retirees doing coastal or cross-country routes they do, you have a physics problem. It existed on the day you signed the paperwork, you just didn't know it yet. The third is time-restricted zones. These look like ordinary parking signs until you read the fine print. No parking 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. That's always been there. What's changed is enforcement. In the last 3 years, license plate recognition cameras have been deployed at scale across cities in the U.S. and Europe. A quiet residential block that felt safe 5 years ago is now actively monitored overnight in dozens of cities. The camera doesn't negotiate, it just sends you a bill. Nobody spending serious money on a Hymer Grand Canyon S wants to discover on the road that the vehicle doesn't fit the places they plan to visit. That's not a trip problem, that's a buying problem. The vehicle selection angle. Here's where smart buyers separate themselves from everyone else. Not all camper vans carry the same parking risk, and when you understand why, it changes how you evaluate vehicles entirely. The Volkswagen California is the clearest example. It's built on the same platform as a commercial transporter. Its exterior, when the roof is down, reads as a utility vehicle, not a home on wheels. In German cities, in French residential zones, and UK high streets, a VW California parked overnight generates categorically different legal and practical friction than a purpose-built motorhome. That distinction matters at 2 a.m. when an enforcement officer is deciding whether to knock. In Europe, the Malibu Van 600 on the Fiat Ducato platform carries full motorhome type approval, the kind of certification that unlocks legal overnight standing in designated Airs in France, Stellplatzes in Germany, and similar facilities across the continent. Most gray market conversions don't have it. Buyers almost never ask.
In the U.S. market, the Coachman Nova on the Ram ProMaster and the Pleasureway Plateau TS on the Mercedes Sprinter are both worth understanding from a parking profile standpoint. The Plateau TS has a relatively low-profile exterior compared to purpose-built motorhomes. No aggressive roof vents stacked high, no graphics that announce full-time habitation. That visual restraint is a practical advantage when enforcement officers exercise discretion. The Nova, by contrast, sits taller and reads more immediately as a live-in vehicle, which changes the enforcement dynamic on urban streets. Vehicles that don't visually announce that someone is living in them get treated differently than ones that do. Not always, but consistently enough that it's a real factor.
This isn't about which van looks better. It's about understanding that vehicle selection and parking strategy are the same decision. The buyers who grasp that before purchase make very different choices than the ones who figure it out afterward. The insurance scenario. Controversial insight. Now here's the piece most buyers never hear about, and this one matters more than the fines. Imagine your van catches fire. Engine fault, electrical issue, it happens. You file a claim. Your insurer processes it. Then they ask one question. Were you using this vehicle as a primary or part-time dwelling? If you have a standard auto policy, the kind most dealerships help you set up at purchase, you may be about to discover a serious problem. Many standard auto policies don't explicitly cover vehicles being used for habitation unless that use has been disclosed and specifically included in the policy. The gap isn't always obvious. It typically only becomes visible when a claim is filed. And by that point, the van may already be totaled. This isn't a hypothetical, it's a documented failure pattern, and it typically services well into full-time travel, right when buyers are least equipped to absorb the loss. Specialty van life insurance exists. National General in the U.S. and a handful of European equivalents offer RV-specific policies that explicitly cover habitation use. These products solve the problem cleanly, but you have to know to ask for them at purchase. Most buyers don't know the question exists until it's too late. Here's what connects this back to parking. A repeated citation history creates a documented record of how you're using the vehicle. That record can become relevant in a claim context. The parking problem and the insurance problem aren't separate issues. Smart buyers treat them as one. What smart buyers actually do? 4 things. This is the practical section. 1. They map the route before they research the van. Every city, every corridor they realistically plan to travel. They check overnight parking conditions for each before they ever look at a spec sheet. That process, tedious as it is, frequently eliminates certain classes entirely before a single dollar is spent. 2. They use real intelligence, not just apps. Parking apps will show you legal. A forum post from last Tuesday will show you got cited here Wednesday at 11 p.m. The Sprinter source, r/van dwellers, free campers in Europe. These contain granular, current, experiential data that no app aggregates reliably. Smart buyers are in those threads during their research phase, not their trip. 3. They budget for legal overnight infrastructure. Harvest hosts, Boondockers Welcome, Campito in Europe. These are not luxuries. For any buyer whose travel includes urban corridors, membership in one or more of these networks is an operational cost, same category as fuel and insurance. The buyer who factors this in before purchase makes better vehicle decisions and sleeps better. Literally. 4. They get the right insurance before the keys change hands. Not after the first trip, not after the first claim issue, before. It costs more than a standard auto policy. The delta is a few $100s a year. Compared to the alternative, it's not a close call. Who should buy, who should wait? Let's make this concrete. Buy without hesitation if your primary travel is rural. Parks, BLM land, harvest hosts, designated heirs. If the van is a weekend vehicle and you have a permanent address, the urban parking question is largely irrelevant to your ownership. The Winnebago Boldt, the Airstream Interstate 24, the Hymer Grand Canyon S, excellent vehicles for this profile. Buy one with confidence. Do serious homework first if you're planning extended travel through major metro areas. Retirees doing coastal tours, families moving between cities, full-timers with urban-heavy itineraries. For this buyer, vehicle selection needs to account for parking profile, height restrictions, registration classification, and insurance structure. The research takes a few weeks. It's worth every hour. Pause entirely if your van life plan is still primarily based on social media content, you haven't mapped a realistic route, and you haven't stress-tested the parking question in your top target cities. Not because van life isn't achievable, it absolutely is, but because the gap between the curated version and the operational reality is widest here. Close that gap first, the van will still be there. Here's the truth that ties all of this together. The biggest campervan mistake isn't buying the wrong van, it's buying the right van for the wrong lifestyle, and parking is exactly where that mistake gets exposed. The industry, dealers, YouTube channels, van life accounts, sells you the vehicle and the dream, sometimes in the same breath. What it almost never sells you is the operational reality required to actually live that dream without waking up to fines, tow trucks, and coverage gaps. That information exists, it's not hidden, it just requires someone to treat you like a real buyer with a real financial decision to make, not an audience to entertain. The retired couple from the beginning of this video isn't an edge case, they're the median outcome for buyers who skip this research. The version of that story where they did the homework first looks completely different. Different route, possibly a different vehicle, definitely a different insurance policy, and a trip that actually matches the one they spent 10 years imagining. The most expensive campervan mistake isn't the van you buy, it's discovering too late that you can't use it the way you imagined. One question for the comments: what's the most unexpected parking situation you've run into or heard about in a campervan? Real city, real story. Drop it below. The more specific, the better. This is how buyers who haven't left yet actually learn what's coming.